to invite you to know me. And in particular, there's parts of myself that I'm embarrassed about, that I'm ashamed of, and I want you to know that stuff about me.
You know, John, as a pastor, you must see this. We've had powerful testimonies on Focus on the Family of husbands and wives where there's been a serious break of trust. It may be infidelity, whatever it might be. Those couples that can fight through that actually, to me, have such great intimacy after the fact, after a real brokenness, that it's actually spectacular.
Yeah, no.
Why is that?
I like, it's kind of like when a bone breaks, it can be strongest at the point where the break was. And so what can happen is there's this break, there's this bad decision, enormous pain. I think of having to sit with the children of a couple where there had been an affair and explain to them what was going on. And it was just the most wrenching moment.
Yeah.
And over many, many years, they came back together with each other. And that was 30 years ago when that happened. The husband just died this past year. And to watch the way that she loved him and they cared for each other, the healing that took place, and even that part of their relationship that was the most painful because they were able to experience forgiveness and reconciliation, that became the most tender, and their relationship became so much more real and so much more authentic because they knew the absolute core stuff that most couples just hide. So it can actually be an opportunity to come out of the hiding that most of us live in continually.
And you know, for us, it's so counterintuitive to think that through sin we can actually find greater intimacy. I mean, it's not what we should pursue, obviously, but it's like Romans 8:28. God will redeem it. He'll use all things.
Yeah.
And he does it in that case.
John Ortberg is our guest on Focus on the Family, and we're covering just some of the great material in his book, I'd Like You More If You Were More Like Me. And we've got the book and a CD or download and our mobile app, all at focusonthefamily.ca, or call 1-800-661-9800. This Focus on the Family broadcast will continue in just a moment.
Did you know that the divorce rate among Christians is estimated at 1 in 3 couples? And it's over 50% for those who get remarried. This breakdown in marriage has painful consequences for children and for families. Canadian couples need an alternative to divorce that can save their marriage. That's why we at Focus on the Family Canada want to bring an intensive counseling program called Hope Restored to Canada. Hope Restored has been successfully running in the United States for 17 years, and it has a proven track record. It saves marriages on the brink of divorce. We now have the opportunity to bring it to Canada, but we need your help to do this. Will you donate today and bring this marriage-saving program to Canada? Your donation will save marriages at risk of divorce. And when you give today, your donation will be matched. Learn more at focusonthefamily.ca/match. That's focusonthefamily.ca/match.
Are you tired of TV that's dark, negative, and stressful? Rich in Toronto wrote us and said, the day I discovered Hope TV was a game changer. I'd had a long day, and when I turned it on, motivational speaker and former CFL linebacker Brian Warren was talking about how to be a great father. It was so refreshing and inspiring. For television that's always positive, find Hope TV on your local TV listing or at hopetelevision.ca. And find hope today.
Thanks for listening to Focus on the Family. Let's resume now with the balance of today's programming.
John, I want to provide some practical advice for folks who are resonating with this. They're thinking maybe, I haven't been able to be open with even my closest relationships, maybe my spouse or friends or the Lord. What's required of us in order to develop these kind of intimate relationships that we know we're fully living, as you described a moment ago?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's, I think, a ton of hope for people. A lot of times people have this idea that intimacy is built on real big, emotional, dramatic moments, and actually it's not. There's a researcher, John Gottman, great marriage researcher, and he says what's happening in relationships all the time is people are making what he calls bids for intimacy or bids for connection. And so just saying, did you see the game last night? Have you read this book? Have you had coffee yet? That's not just a piece of information. That's somebody saying, I want to be connected with you. And to learn to recognize bids for intimacy. A lot of us just blow past them. We don't recognize that. But anytime somebody's offering to share an experience, have you seen this cat video? That's a bid for connection.
Yeah.
And that's why it's not just for feelers. It's not just these deep emotional stuffing. Gottman actually says a lot of times we think about successful marriages as being ones that have these real deep emotional conversations all the time. He says, no, it's not. It's primarily relationships where people are skilled at giving and receiving bids for connection all the time.
You know, I totally agree with that. The difficulty I have, and I think on behalf of some people who have high expectations of what intimacy actually is, and then they build up something more significant, so they're not even recognizing their spouse.
Yeah. No, I love that. So the first place to start, in a sense, is just lower the bar.
In a good way, it's healthy.
In a real good way, so you don't, project a Lifetime movie of expectation on a relationship. And where you have to start is to say, what's a bid for connection? If I want more intimacy with this other person, what's a bid for connection that they're likely to receive well?
Yeah.
So, for example, we have 3 kids. With 2 of my kids, if I were to say to them, I'd like to go out for lunch and just look you in the eye, and I want to know, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? What's going on in your heart? They would love that. I would gain points for that. I have another kid where if I said that, they would run scream in the other direction. That's not going to feel good to them. But if we share time together, if we get in the car, but we don't actually have to make eye contact and we're just hanging out and conversation can emerge, that will be a bid for intimacy with that kid that works really well. So where it has to start is I have to be aware of not just what's the kind of connection that I want, but what's the kind of connection that you want, and how do I enter into your world?
That sounds like the first step to selflessness, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Communicate with me the way I need to be communicated with, not the way you need to communicate with me. In that regard, John, sometimes, and I think for me, I'll say this can be my issue. I grew up hard. I grew up as an orphan kid, and part of that mechanism is you begin to block off those areas. Now, I feel healthy, but Jean will sometimes say to me, I think you're not feeling right now. You're not in the moment with me. You're just like happy-go-lucky. Usually, the typical Jim. Let's just move forward. And I see that as a healthy thing. She sees it as a problem.
Denial ain't just a river in Egypt.
Denial can work for you, can't it?
You just went public with this, so
Well,
I'm
no,
really interested in
to
what
me,
you
I feel
feel.
guilty sometimes because I'm going, what am I missing here?
Yeah.
Because I think it's quite right to say, okay, let's just forge ahead.
Yeah.
Let's be joyful in all things. I can do that really well.
Yeah.
But some of the folks around me can say, wow, okay, you're not in reality.
Yeah, you're not in
How do
touch
you-
with what's actually going on
How do you
inside.
find that right spiritual balance that I am okay or I'm not okay?
Yeah. The importance of self-awareness is so key. And just asking God, search me and know me. And the reason that gets asked is because I don't know myself. There's all kinds of parts of myself that I don't know.
That's called a blinder.
Yes, exactly right. There's just huge blind spots. And the difficulty is if I'm not aware of them, they're driving my behavior, and you can see it when you look at me, but I can't see it.
Right.
So I have a real good friend. We just started doing something this last year that's been super helpful. Every morning for 10 minutes, we call each other up. And we talk about, how did yesterday go? Like, what do I need to learn from yesterday? And what am I facing today that I need prayer for?
That's great.
It's amazing. We're both kind of amazed. I'm a pea on the Myers-Briggs, so I'm real disorganized, and I don't like to plan stuff. I'm very spontaneous. So it's really hard for me to put something on my calendar that works. But this one, we both look forward to so much that we just love it. And I was talking to him this morning before I came on the show and saying, I've got a conversation with somebody that I need to have, and I'm aware of the fact that I don't want to have it. I'm aware of the fact that it makes me anxious, and I don't like to think of myself as being anxious because that feels weak, and I'd rather avoid it. And naming that means, okay, now I can deal with it. But if I wasn't aware of it, it would drive my behavior, but I would know it.
Yeah.
John, is there any reason that you can't have that conversation with your wife, or maybe you do? I'm struck by that. The 10 minutes is a long time to be talking.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of busy.
Well, I'm going, man, that's a short period of time.
There are a lot of
You're an extrovert.
I don't even 20.
You haven't even got past hello in 10 minutes.
10 minutes go. That's
You know, if you got little kids, 10 minutes is like forever. You can't do it without interruption.
Oh,
so,
no, little kids is a whole different thing.
What's your advice to doing that as a couple? I mean,
Yeah. You know, for Nancy and I, particularly when our kids were smaller, what I would say could be really helpful is find the best time of day. And for us, it was afternoon. I'm a morning person, Nancy and I person, so we kind of compromise with that. Find a really good place. We actually, it's literally true, we would go into our bathroom. Because you can lock it up. Kids couldn't get at us. That's the best room in the house. Daddy, we had our best conversations around the toilet.
Now there's a piece of advice.
Yeah. That may be another image that you really don't want to
I don't want that.
But find a good time, find a good place, when you're not going to be hurried and you're not going to be rushed, and you're able to ask a question where the other person's able to receive it, so that you look forward to it. I think the big thing in relational world is we all live with so many shoulds and have to and musts and oughts, and that's true and they're important to pay attention to, but you can't sustain life on the basis of should.
Right.
There's got to be a draw to it.
Boy, that's good advice for parenting, too.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, when you're dealing with kids to find, and again, this gets to intimacy. What are ways that we connect that we both look forward to?
Yeah, that is so good.
And so with your spouse to find, maybe it's early in our marriage, we used to go out to Carl's Jr. once a week and we'd get iced tea because we had no money. So it's like
Nice tea.
iced tea. In a bender. And we looked forward to that so much because, again, it was kid-free time and it gave us space. So it's like, oh, man, this is a reward. So a time that you really look forward to doesn't have to be profound. Don't put pressure on it to be this real deep, vulnerable thing. If it gets there, great, but you can't force intimacy and vulnerability.
No, that is so
you can
good.
make space for it.
John, let me ask you this, and this may be gender stereotype again, but what I'm driving at is rejection and the impact on intimacy. And again, generally, but not always, men and women deal with rejection differently. Women struggle then with trust and other things. Men tend to just get upset. You reject me, I'll reject you. It's competition again. I'll show you. Women don't handle it that way. Speak to both men and women, the way rejection affects our intimacy.
It can play out differently, but rejection is something that the strongest person in the world feels in the depth of their soul. We are made for what Dallas Willard used to call reciprocal rootedness in one another. We feel so keenly because the will is right at the core of who you are. If somebody else's will is opposed to me, if they reject me, I feel that so deeply. We have a guy in our church that actually wrote a book on the topic of rejection therapy. He was going into entrepreneurial stuff, and he got rejected, and it killed him. So he actually made it a point every day to deliberately get rejected by somebody. And he went into Dunkin' Donuts and asked for them to come up with a special 5 Olympic donut ring, just to hear them say no. And the woman behind the counter said, I think I can do that. And so he went viral. He was videoing this with his iPhone. It has been seen by millions and millions of people. So he actually worked on rejection by deliberately courting it to teach himself that he could be rejected and still survive.
Wow. I mean, that's quite something.
It is pretty amazing.
You know, John, before we end, I really want to dig into our relationship with the Lord. That's most critical. You get that foundation right, so much of your life will be in a much better place. It's not a guarantee. You're still going to have struggles, but knowing the Lord and pursuing the Lord and having an understanding that He loves us unconditionally. Your concepts especially rejection. So speak to that intimacy with the Lord. How do we really believe? If we've felt rejection in our life, how do we get to the point where we can really believe that God so loved us that He died for us? I can't embrace that.
For anybody who's listening to this right now, I just want to take you through, when you think about God, what images come to your mind? Where did that get shaped? Was it by a harsh parent? Was it by a Sunday school class that gave you all kinds of punitive pictures? And to spend time alone where you're not hurried in the presence of God and to hear Him say over you, I love you, I delight in you, there is nothing that you can do, there is nothing that you can achieve that can make me love you anymore, there is nothing that you have done wrong that has moved you away from me. For people, not just to hear us say the words, but to spend the time alone with God, to experience His unconditional acceptance of them, there is no replacement for that.
And don't be distracted. I mean, where I feel guilty sometimes is the very thing that will feed me and nurture me is that time with the Lord. And I give myself to the busyness of life, and I too frequently don't give my time to God in that way.
Well, then acceptance from God.
What do you mean by that?
Years ago, I decided I was just tired of living in isolation and secrecy, and so I have a real good friend, and I decided I would tell him every single secret of my life, so that there would be nothing that would be hidden from him. And I knew him, and I could trust him really well. I'd known him for years, and I took a lot of time to review my life and just wrote down all the stuff that I was embarrassed about, ashamed of, money, sexuality, everything. And it took a couple hours to walk through all of that. And when I got to the end of my list, I was so ashamed. And I didn't even want to look at him. And I'll never forget this moment. Rick looked me in the eye and he said, "John, I have never loved you more than I love you right now." And it felt so good. I wanted to make up more bad stuff to tell him, just to hear more, because, and I realized then, you can only be loved to the extent that you're known. And you can only be fully loved if you're fully known.
Yes.
And to realize God knows me fully. There is nothing secret from God.
Well, even his words are so Christ-like. I could hear the Lord saying that to us.
And that's the point. For me then to step back and say, God saying to me, when I am most open with him, I have never loved you more than I love you right now.
And unfortunately, John, we so often equate that to say, if I was vulnerable, and the Lord already knows. It's not like you're, getting one over on him. He knows you. He knows everything. He knows it before you've done it. So to be vulnerable with the Lord and still feel that acceptance in him, that's the key. Yeah, man, this has been good, John. This is so good. Your book, I'd like you more if you were more like me. Dog and cat on the cover. My wife particularly liked that image. Wonderful material. Thank you for being with us today.
It's been a joy. Thanks, guys.
All right, so get a copy of Pastor John Ortberg's book, I'd Like You More If You Were More Like Me. And we've got that, a CD or a download of our program. We're just a phone call away. We have other helps as well. 800-661-9800. 800-661-9800. Or stop by focusonthefamily.ca.
And when you order the book through Focus Canada, you're helping the ministry to provide other resources, counseling and other things, to help strengthen marriages and help parents do a better job parenting their kids. So support Focus on the Family Canada today.
Donate, get help, and get resources at focusonthefamily.ca or when you call 800-661-9800. As we close, please join us next time when you'll hear how you can teach your children in an age-appropriate way about sexual abuse, and you can empower them to protect themselves.
You're slowly building that foundation, and one, it builds a trust so that if something does happen, or if they're exposed to something, or they have a question, they're going to know Mom and Dad, they're safe.
On behalf of Jim Daly and the entire team, thanks for listening to Focus on the Family. I'm John Fuller, inviting you back as we once again help you and your family thrive in Christ.